Picture this. A woman sits at a small wooden desk in rural Bavaria. Outside, it's 1943. The sky over Europe is black with smoke. Somewhere east of here, trainloads of human beings are being shipped to their deaths. Somewhere in Berlin, her husband is signing orders that historians will spend decades trying to fully comprehend. And she is writing him a love letter. She dips her pen and writes, "I am so lucky to possess such a good, evil man who loves his evil wife as much as she loves him." She folds the letter, seals it, and goes back to tending her herb garden. This woman was not a shadow figure. She was not kept in the dark. She visited the concentration camps voluntarily and returned home without saying a word to anyone. She knew exactly who she had married. She called him evil and meant it as a compliment. Her name was Margarete Himmler, wife of Heinrich Himmler, head of the SS, architect of the Holocaust. And her story, how she loved him, how she suffered, and how she died, may be the most disturbing love story of the entire Second World War. Welcome to Nazi History, where we dig past the propaganda, cut through the mythology, and bring you the raw, documented truth that mainstream history tends to skip. If this is your first time here, subscribe right now and hit that bell because we are just getting started, and this story goes places you are not expecting. Let's set the scene properly. It is 1926. The Weimar Republic is limping along. Germany is broke, humiliated, and seething. And in a hotel lobby at the resort town of Bad Reichenhall, a place known for its mountain air and healing mineral springs, a 34-year-old woman named Margarete Boden is sitting alone. She is confident, self-made actually. Born on September 9th, 1893, in a tiny village called Gonkarzewo near Bromberg, today's Bydgoszcz, Poland, she had pulled herself up from a provincial landowner's household into something genuinely impressive. She trained as a combat nurse during the First World War, worked in a Red Cross hospital after the armistice, survived a first marriage that went nowhere, and then, with financial backing from her father, she opened and ran her own private medical clinic in Berlin. In 1926, she is in Bad Reichenhall for rest. She has earned it. Across the lobby, a 25-year-old man notices her. He is thin, bespectacled, and deeply uncertain of himself, in the way that only young men who have never quite fit in can be. His name is Heinrich Himmler, former chicken farmer, aspiring political operative, rising member of a fringe nationalist movement called the National Socialist German Workers' Party. He has no real experience with women. By his own later admission, confirmed by former Nazi insider Otto Strasser, Margarete was the first woman he had ever been with. According to Strasser, she essentially pursued him, a 34-year-old woman, worldly and decisive, seducing a nervous, awkward 25-year-old in a Bavarian mountain resort. If you stripped away everything that came after, this would almost be charming. But nothing about what came after was charming. Here is what most people don't know. Heinrich Himmler did not fall for Margarete despite their similarities. He fell for her because of them. They were, on paper, a perfect match, just not in any way that reflects well on either of them. Both were obsessed with order and efficiency. Both kept meticulous records of everything. Both were frugal to the point of austerity. Both were deeply interested in homeopathy, herbal medicine, and organic agriculture, which in the 1920s was tied to a nationalist ideology about German purity and connection to the land. And both, critically, shared a bitter, consuming anti-Semitism. Himmler began writing her letters almost immediately after they met. He was smitten in a way that was, historically speaking, completely out of character for the cold bureaucrat he would eventually become. He described her as his ideal woman. He was drawn to her blonde hair, her blue eyes, his total self-possession. They married in July 1928. It was not a celebrated occasion. Himmler's family refused to attend the wedding. His parents were uncomfortable with the age gap, deeply concerned that she was a divorcee, and troubled that she was Protestant, not Catholic. The only people who stood with him at the altar were her father and her brother. Not a single Himmler showed up. And yet Margarete committed completely. Within weeks of the wedding, she joined the Nazi Party, not because her husband pressured her, because she believed. In August 1928, she wrote her husband a letter referring to a Jewish business associate, the co-owner of her Berlin clinic, a gynecologist named Bernhard Hauschild, and wrote without any apparent self-consciousness. That Hauschild, those Jews are all the same. She wasn't performing for anyone. There was no audience. She just meant it. In August 1929, Margarete gave birth to a daughter named Gudrun. Himmler worshipped the child. He called her Poopy, little doll, and phoned her every few days when he was away, which was increasingly often as his power grew. They also became foster parents to Gerhard von Ahe, the son of an SS man shot dead in Berlin shortly after the Nazis took power. Margarete sold her stake in the Berlin clinic for 12,000 Reichsmarks, real money at the time, and the couple relocated to Waldtrudering near Munich. They bought a house and tried to run a small agricultural operation, growing their own produce, keeping chickens, living the idealized folkish rural life that Nazi ideology romanticized. The farm failed almost immediately, but it didn't matter. Within a few years, Himmler's career had exploded. By the mid-1930s, he controlled the SS, the Gestapo, and eventually the entire concentration camp system. He was one of the most feared men on Earth, and the Himmlers stopped worrying about money because they were enriching themselves with property and valuables systematically stolen from murdered Jewish families across Europe. This is documented. This is not speculation. This is the paper trail that survived the war. Meanwhile, Margarete tried to build a social life in the SS world. She hosted weekly Wednesday afternoon coffee gatherings for the wives of senior SS leaders, a kind of forced aristocracy, wives jockeying for position in a hierarchy built on mass murder. She was the most senior wife. She expected everyone to know it. Nobody cared. This is where the story pivots and where it gets genuinely shocking. Lena Heydrich, wife of Reinhard Heydrich, the man who chaired the Wannsee Conference and effectively blueprinted the final solution, despised Margarete Himmler with a fury that was almost personal. She mocked her body openly. She once described her to people in their social circle as nothing more than size 50 underwear. After the war, she told a Der Spiegel reporter that Margarete was a narrow-minded, humorless, blonde-haired woman who suffered from agoraphobia so severe it kept her trapped indoors. German journalist Bella Fromm, who observed Margarete at a social event in 1937, wrote in her private notes that she appeared dirty blonde, dull, and fat, and suggested that food was the only real pleasure left in her life. And here is the detail that historians find most psychologically fascinating. Inside their home, Heinrich Himmler, the man who directed the Holocaust, who commanded the SS, who answered only to Adolf Hitler, was apparently powerless. Baldur von Schirach, former leader of the Hitler Youth, wrote in his post-war memoirs, "The chief of police in the SS was a nobody at home. He always had to give in." Margarete dominated her husband, at least until 1936. She made demands. She pressed him. She insisted on controlling their domestic world with the same iron efficiency that he brought to the machinery of genocide. And then he hired a secretary. In 1936, a 24-year-old woman named Hedwig Potthast joined Himmler's staff. She was young, warm, entirely devoted to him. Everything Margarete had stopped being. By 1938, she was his mistress. Together, Himmler and Hedwig would have 2 children, a son named Helga, born in 1942, and a daughter named Ninette Dorothea. Himmler set Hedwig up in a separate house. He visited her regularly. He did not hide the relationship from the inner circle. They all knew. Margarete found out by February 1941 at the latest. She did not leave. Divorce in the SS world carried social consequences neither of them wanted. And whatever twisted loyalty she still felt toward Himmler, toward their daughter, toward the ideology that had defined their lives together, she stayed. She stayed humiliated, furious, and utterly powerless in the one area of her life she had always controlled. The man she had seduced in a hotel lobby 15 years earlier now barely came home except to see his daughter. During the war, Margarete returned to Red Cross work. She rose to the rank of Oberstführerin, colonel, and supervised military hospitals in the Berlin-Brandenburg district. She traveled across occupied territories, visiting countries under German control. In March 1940, during a trip to occupied Poland, she wrote in her diary after visiting Lodz and Warsaw. What she wrote about the Jewish population she observed has been preserved. It is vile. It describes human beings as subhuman. It describes the conditions around her, conditions created by German occupation, as a mess that needed cleaning up. She was not confused about what was happening. She was not naive about what German occupation meant. And then there are the camp visits. Margarete Himmler visited Dachau, the oldest concentration camp in the Nazi system, operational since 1933, on multiple occasions. She went to inspect its herb garden, which Himmler had ordered cultivated as part of his obsession with homeopathic medicine and SS self-sufficiency. She walked through the gates. She saw the prisoners. She toured Ravensbrück, the women's camp. Allied investigators noted after the war that she was the only senior SS wife known to have physically entered the concentration camp system. She came home every time and said nothing to anyone. By spring 1945, the Reich was finished. Himmler, in one of history's most desperate acts of cowardice, had secretly attempted to negotiate a separate peace with the Western Allies behind Hitler's back. Hitler found out. He stripped Himmler of every title, every position, every shred of power he had accumulated over 2 decades. On May 23, 1945, British forces captured Himmler near Bremen. He had disguised himself as a low-ranking sergeant. Within hours of being taken into custody, he bit down on a cyanide capsule he had hidden in his mouth. He died on the floor. No trial, no accountability, no final reckoning. Margarete had already fled. With SS assistance, she took Gudrun south to Bolzano in South Tyrol, northern Italy, still under German control, and went into hiding. On May 13, 1945, 5 days after the war's official end, she was arrested. Allied interrogators questioned her extensively. She claimed she knew nothing. She pushed every question back toward Hitler. Whatever Heinrich had done, he was merely following the Führer's orders. Interrogators described her as possessing a small-town mentality that she maintained stubbornly throughout every session. But they also knew she had been inside the camps, and she had nothing to say about that. Margarete and Gudrun testified at the Nuremberg trials. They were released in November 1946. Afterward, Margarete publicly complained that she and her daughter had been imprisoned and treated as though they owed a debt for her husband's crimes. She used the word alleged. She died on August 25, 1967, in Munich. She was 73 years old. Her diary, 122 pages, covering 1937 to 1945, is preserved today at the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C. Scholars who have studied it do not find a woman wrestling with guilt. They find a woman who is bitter, overlooked, and resentful, but never sorry. Here is the thing that history keeps teaching us over and over, and we keep refusing to hear. Evil does not operate in a vacuum. It is loved. It is cooked for. It is written love letters. It is protected, enabled, and in the case of Margarete Himmler, it is called a good man by the woman who knew exactly what he was. She was not a bystander. She was not a victim. She was a participant who chose every single day to look at what her husband was building and decide it was worth loving. That is the most disturbing part of this entire story. Not the power, not the violence, but the love. This is Nazi history. We bring you the stories history buried, documented, accurate, and unflinching. If this episode hit different, like it right now. It costs you nothing, and it tells the algorithm this story matters. Subscribe if you haven't, and turn on notifications so you catch every episode the moment it drops. We will see you in the next one.